We're going to talk about startups. The bad news is that usually have bands like Led Zeppelin playing here, so unfortunately that's not what's going to happen today. Anyway, thanks everybody for coming. It's a subject this is a subject essentially, we'll call it advertising agencies and startups, that's very near and dear to me. And just for, I'll give you a second of background. I'm Peter Levitan. I owned an advertising agency. I've also had 3 startups. 2 were very successful. One was a failure in generating funding. And I'm starting my 3rd one, which is called nerds.com. There's nothing there right now, but it's really based on the idea that nerds is a very popular concept in culture. And based on that, I can tell you I am very interested in this subject. I'm a very big fan of advertising agencies getting involved with the startup community, and I think we've got a great crew here today. So who do we have? On my far left is Rennie Gleason from Wieden Kennedy. He is, I had to write this down, it's a lot of words, Global Digital Strategies Director, is that right?
Yeah, it's strong.
Okay. Kevin Tate on my left is a general partner at UpStart Labs, and they've got a few businesses that they are nurturing at the moment. On my right is Dylan Boyd, who has done many things in Portland, but at the moment, what does your t-shirt say?
Techstars.
He's is it managing director, some title like that, of Techstars, and most recently ushered in 10 great companies as part of the Nike Plus accelerator group. And if I'm not wrong, 700 people were at Nike 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago? A lot of people. So this is big stuff for corporations, and maybe Dylan can talk about that as well. Steve Giannini is the president and CFO of Opal. And he has also, everyone here, frankly, has been in the business of helping startups get going. He's been doing that for years, and now he's part of Opal. And George Huff is the CEO of Opal. And he brings a very interesting perspective to today because he is also the CEO of an advertising agency. So Opal is birthed out of We the Media, and it's an interesting proposition to think about how an agency can have a product, recognize that it has legs, and actually can be its own business. So I think that that's a very interesting perspective. I wanted to start with Kevin, and to help us understand some of the terminology here. What is the difference between incubator and an accelerator?
Oh my God. Well, I'll tell you what it's come to me in the last few years. Is this, can you guys hear me? This mic says CBS on it, which really adds to the whole Led Zeppelin plays here sort of intensity, so I feel important. So I think what it means today is there's and you guys can throw things at me, but I think accelerators tend to, like Techstars and Y Combinator and Pi, operate with very young concepts and founders, and they offer a get-started program with mentorship, and these guys can talk about all the great things, but that's kind of where it fits in the process. And usually where UpStart plays and where I think more incubators play is a little bit after that. So now you've got a really well-refined idea, and maybe a couple of you are doing this full-time, and now you need to get from, my glib phrase, from demo day to Series A. And how do you grow and build it rhymes too. So yeah, how do you go through that? And you need a place to do that and incubate your company. And then it turns out that some incubators focus on a space, and some focus on investment, and some focus on services, and there's all kinds of different flavors. But I think that's the main differentiator, is kind of where they fit in the life cycle of an early stage company, both of which come before Series A, which is the $2 million VC investment usually.
And Techstars is an accelerator? Is that where you fit in?
Yeah. I need a mic, don't I? Techstars is a complete accelerator. The entire program is based on a 13-week strategy of incredible. A few of you have participated as mentors. Mentoring, which means come and tear me apart for the first 2 weeks. Everyone that shows up with the most brilliant idea that we've accepted into the program is torn apart for the first 10 to 14 days. I mean, in a good way. It's like, why does this not work? Why is this broken? Your idea here is horrible. It's kind of like boot camp. And then next, it's constructive and building back up. What have we learned? What did we tear apart? What are we going to start building back up? We spend the middle part of it truly building things, and the last part of it preparing for demo day and pitching and fundraising and raising money. And we just finished last week. So this has just been a week of reflection and trying to figure out what we did and were we successful or not and where did we fail. I mean, and I guess with accelerators, we fail every single day. So with startups and working with entrepreneurs, we think a lot about every day of their long-term success and teaching them it's okay to fail. But yet we know we ended every day at 10:30 at night, like 6:30, 7 in the morning, and 10:30 at night. And every night we ended up with how do we screw up today? What are we going to do different tomorrow? I think that's where Techstars is a mentality. We kind of are a startup for startups. Drink our own Kool-Aid.
And so just give us a minute on what Techstars is, because you're a national organization.
Yeah, we're international now, Peter. How about that? We actually are, London is our first international office. New York, Boston. We just moved San Antonio to Austin, Texas, which was probably the right decision. Seattle. Seattle. Chicago. We've just added, and we're going to continue to add a few U.S. locations and quite a few international locations. Like most of the future of Techstars is international. And the other part of it, that's the corporate side. The other part of it is what we do, like this Nike accelerator. It's called a Powered By, where we come in and work with top Fortune 50 companies around the world to help take innovation and acceleration, partnership, exploration outside of their walls, right? In Nike's case, off campus, outside of the berm, to a place in which we can all kind of work together and get problems out in the open and tackle challenges. And I actually brought this. I have to get it back, so if anyone leaves with it, death. This is actually an internal thing I can share with you of what the goals of the program were and why we did it and how we approached it. This is just a really quick flip. But when you work with someone like Nike compared to, something else, everything comes with a booklet. Everything comes with a deliverable. Everything comes with a presentation. And it's a different culture to learn from. So it's probably our biggest takeaway in these Powered Bys. And you'll see these happen with us around the world in the coming months and next few years. Of this is kind of the other side of the coin for us is going into this area. As you're working on kind of incubation, we're working on additional acceleration globally.
Well, this is a great opportunity to have Rennie actually talk while he's texting somebody.
I'm tweeting the comments here.
So I'm going to ask him a question. Why does Wieden Kennedy get involved with startups? And you guys have been fairly active for 3 or 4 years, right? So help us understand what your relationship is with this world.
So I think the initial conversation was around, as an agency, how do we rethink what we make, how we make it, and who makes it? That was sort of one of the operating questions. And we paired that with a second question, which was, how do you create real value for the startups who are innovating and solving real interesting business problems? So that was sort of the impetus about 4 years ago when we started this stuff up. And it was a very informal experience for the first 2 years.
Is that PI? Is that how
Yeah,
you did that? Can you
that's
tell
PI.
the folks here what PI is?
Oh, sorry. PI is the Portland Incubator Experiment, and it has been an ongoing experiment between Wieden Kennedy, entrepreneurs and technologists, both here and around the world, for the past 4 years. And it's gone through a couple different versions. If you haven't heard it, it began more as a collaborative space, and then it formalized as a accelerator really in the last, even though it was accelerating by accident for the first 2 years, it formalized that process in the last 2. And I think the reason why Wieden is interested in something like this is more broadly, one, how do we, I think Pi is a special thing for Portland. For us, it was very much a conversation about, there's this very interesting startup ecosystem happening here in a lot of different places, and is there a way to have a conversation and participate credibly in that? A lot of new companies coming out of that space, and a question of, is there real value that an agency can generate for those companies? And again, back to rethinking sort of how we solve problems for clients. So if you really boil it down, I think every agency right now is dealing with the issue of, creating stories and telling stories. And what we've been really good at for a long time is creating the stories. And what we're trying to get much better at, and what I think every agency that's thinking about this stuff is doing, is rethinking how you tell those stories. The experiences that you build, how you break and recreate media vehicles, how you tell stories in different ways, create through experiences, through tools, through sort of all of that. So for us, that's been one of the really interesting things is we've been able to relearn how to tell stories in partnership with these companies as they accelerate.
So that means you're helping them tell their story?
Yep, that too.
Okay. And is there a story that you tell? One of the things that interests me with agencies is how this getting involved in this world can be used as a new business tool, right? My sense is it makes you look sharper.
Yeah,
so how? Okay. I know that everything
So-
Wieden Kennedy does, they do.
No.
Because you're nice people.
That's it. Exactly. Right. No. I caution anybody in the agency space who's thinking about getting involved with startups. Like, you got to look yourself in the mirror and say, what the hell am I? How am I contributing to what they're doing? Because yeah, you could use it as a new business pitch and go and lie about how or fabricate these stories. But like, unless the startups coming out of the space feel like they really benefited from it, then it's just PR. And I think, quite honestly, when we started Pi, a lot of folks were suspicious of it, rightfully so. And we're like, is this just a PR move? Is Wieden just trying to sort of jump into the startup space? And I think that was why, frankly, we didn't even talk about it for the first 2 years. There were no press releases. There was no, we kept it very quiet because we wanted to find out for real, like, is there real value? Not for the brands that we would use it, but for the startups participating. And then, yes, of late, you've got a lot of brands who are all like, ooh, startups, wow. And it's kind of this interesting failure of innovation in a lot of companies who've built these structures that don't really enable fast prototyping, fast business solutions. And so a lot of them are turning to startups and saying, oh, well, maybe, but that's why, again, just think about what the value is, because you can waste a lot of startups' time if you're not really clear about what the value is they're getting out of it and why they're participating in it. And so to your point, yes, we do work very carefully to help the startups tell their stories, because that's one of the benefits of being involved with us.
Go ahead.
Just to add, I mean, we had the fortune, and Wieden's done this over and over again in Pi, of helping each of the startups with rebranding and their decks. We brought in this class, Wieden took 2 of the companies, RGA, Instrument, AKQA, and Engine, and really helped all of them reshape their entire storytelling ability, their pitches, and some of those actually have turned in already. I mean, before they even left, into business relationships and ongoing deals. These guys work in hours and days. They don't work in weeks and months. They're working against a clock of how much money's left in the bank.
We've talked about it. The startup can burn and die in the time it takes to set up a meeting with a brand. So it's definitely, there's...
So this is potentially one of the learnings for agencies is the understanding of the concept of burn rate. Because agencies have burn rates, right? I mean, speed equals money.
Speed equals survival.
Okay.
And winning.
And George, so your agency has launched its own product. Why don't you tell us for a second what Opal is, and then how you sort of acted as your own incubator? How did that happen?
It's a long question, long answer. So Opal is in the business of building collaboration software for marketers, and we got the insight for a lot of the stuff that we do in Opal and working with brands like Nike. And so for us, it was sort of when we started We the Media, we had a product mindset. We wanted to build products, and we ended up building products for companies. And so we saw this opportunity to actually take the talent that we had and the experience that we had to launch something. And so instead of, it wasn't like we carved off a team, we had extra budget, and they were off in a room together. That sounds great. But for an agency of 7 to 10 people, that wasn't really an option. And so we actually went about it and started a thing called Work Late Wednesday. And really that's what it comes down to is creating a mechanism that's outside of work that allows you to start working on your side project. And then if you keep at it, right? Like if you keep at it and you keep at it and you keep at it, something will happen. But I think it's, for a small agency to start their own product is kind of ludicrous. It's insane. I mean, that's the only way I look back on it.
Can I ask? Is it legal for me to ask? So because we did this, you never know. Because when we were at Step Change, we flirted with products,
right?
And I'd say they became like bad hobbies at best.
Yeah. And why don't you just stop for a second? Tell us what Step Change was.
We were a social media agency. We started as a technology company, and then we realized that we were really an agency. And actually, a lot of the folks in this room were really helpful in me understanding like what is an agency and the plug for PAF and the Agency Owners Roundtable and all that. So But anyway, we would flirt with these product ideas, and when they never became anything. And then years later, we look back and said, what is the thing that we would have needed to do to make it real or to take the step? Do you look back and say, this was the moment we, made it real, became Opal?
Yeah, we had a really interesting kind of genesis of Opal in the sense that we had a big project that we did that was a big platform, and it was sort of hey, if we take this platform we built as a proprietary thing for one company, build our own version and white label it, we can take it to market, right? So I think there's a lot of insight that agencies have in working with big brands or anybody in general, where you can see what they're looking to do. We work a lot with Nike, and the great thing about working with Nike is they're 2 years ahead of everybody, and so we're able to kind of see what the landscape's going to be. So we kind of took that moment and basically there was a moment where we deployed our first code and we eat your own dog food kind of thing. It was a collaboration platform, so we started using it ourselves. And so I think the moment that I signed up for our product was the moment that was wow, this is cool. This could actually be something. It took a long time to get us to where we're at, and I was looking on my Facebook timeline of the period where we were kind of building it. And I'm oh my god, I'm so glad I don't have to go back there, because it was just this. Just insane grind and hard times. So like I said, you have to have in order to do the product thing out of an agency, especially if you're a small agency, you just have to have the wherewithal to stick with it. That's it.
So Steve, you were brought in to take this idea and turn it into a business?
I would say, could I change your phrasing of that? I'd say clean up my mess.
All right, okay. So what was the mess you cleaned up, and what do agencies have to think about in terms of the messy bits?
Well, it definitely wasn't a mess. I mean, I really got excited about it. I'd known George for about 5 years before we actually started talking about Opal and the idea of Opal could become a business. George rather, worked with Dylan even back in the eRoy days.
Dylan hired me for my first job, so that's a disclaimer. I have only good things to say.
Typical Portland connection, small town. So we started talking about what does it really mean to have a business, a product business, a software company, and why is that obviously very different from a business perspective than running an agency. I also had a similar agency as UpStart out of San Francisco, between San Francisco and Portland for about 10 years. Worked with Dylan during that time as well. So I kind of lived that whole agency world. How do you source new business? How do you pay employees? How do you constantly have to close business to cover the operational costs of headcount? And it's really an arbitrage play, essentially, sometimes when you're dealing with an agency to stay afloat. You have your own internal burn rate, very different than a product business. So when we started to look at George's business, it was very, very different. What he was going to do and build was going to be a standalone. We are going to build a software company and sell software at the end of the day. So there's all kinds of considerations with that. You have to think about IP ownership. You have to think about contracts of your employees. You have to think about the contracts of contract employees. Make sure that you own the IP that they're building. Make sure that you're documenting what third-party code base that you're using to make sure that you have rights to that when you ultimately are going to sell it to someone. Because you go and you approach a Nestle and a Clorox and a Nike and the kind of companies that we're working with now, you better make sure that you own everything that you're selling them. That's probably the biggest red flag that fortunately wasn't a mess on this end, because we have a CTO that was really cognizant of those kinds of things as well. But it's really just how you organize a business, how you think about it, how you structure it, and then how you allocate your employees against a future revenue stream. So that's the only thing I'd close with, is that's the biggest difference, right? Is you're allocating your employees with an agency against current business that you know you're getting revenue against, and you have line of sight to that. But when you're building a product business, it's revenue that you're going to make 2, 3, 4 years down the line. So it's definitely an investment that you're making.
What do agencies need to think about this? I mean, I think one of the issues here is that agencies just don't think about intellectual property. This is somewhat alien to them.
Disagree.
Well, I think now they do, because I think it's changed a little bit. I think in mid-sized agencies, right? Because I've seen it in your ex-employer in New York. They've just spun out a group of 30 guys that are working on a product, and we're seeing it more and more. The problem is that agencies, good or bad problem, they want to make it beautiful and pixel perfect.
There's nothing wrong with that.
George does an amazing job at doing that. I honestly,
as long as it's profitable.
And startups,
It's called user experience.
yeah, startups we like to ship and refine, right? We might not have the best possible thing out of the gates, but we're going to learn from it really fast and clean that up and do it again and do it again and do it again. The Airbnb guys came out of a design agency. And there's been a lot of great products that have shipped out of design backgrounds. And with us, what's a little different is whether it was where you to go back to your question, we didn't come from a software development agency. We came from a web design agency, right? A marketing agency. And it was foreign for us to think about coding in sprints. It was foreign to us to think about, are we a waterfall mentality shop? Things that you don't think about as an agency or didn't at that point in time that agencies are now exposed to because they have 20 people on a dev side. They have 200 people on a dev team.
And there's also not a lot of software agencies, right? Like most agencies build websites and campaigns and tell stories, to your point, Peter, but like being a software agency was what allowed us to actually make that cognitive leap a little bit easier than an agency that just say builds websites. It's a totally different ballgame.
Yeah,
Although I do want to say,
it's
I think
changed now.
that part of the shift that I think is really interesting, Dylan, is that so many of especially the business-to-business models these days are SaaS models. They're software as a service models. And there's a lot of debate over exactly what SaaS is and how it's changing. But I think at the core of it, the software part of SaaS is about automation and repeatability, and the services part is often where you're delivering that client value, like really hand to hand. And so a too simple way of looking at it is you can be a software company and know a lot about automation. You might not really know about delivering that value, whereas an agency knows all about delivering that value and has to figure out, how do I automate it? How do I write software to make it? And I think there's really merit to both, and the fact that so much of this happens in a SaaS model makes it easier to move from one to the other than it was 10 years ago.
So just so we know what SaaS model is, because not everybody does, what does that mean?
So software as a service is what most of the business-to-business tools that folks are using today. It's a hosted software where you're going to get a level of support and configuration, and depending on how big you are, you get more and more customization too. And so what's interesting about it from a business model is you get to kind of choose. You're going to pay me this as a company, I'm going to deliver you this value, and I get to kind of choose how much of that value comes from software and how much of it comes from humans, and I can move that needle as I need to, and I can learn about things that are valuable and then choose to automate them. And it's just a really interesting way of growing a business that has more mix of software and humans.
So you disagreed a couple of minutes ago. What's your point about this?
Well, I wanted to actually come back to your original question, which I managed to avoid the first time, which was around new business. You said, is Pi useful to a Wieden in a new business? And more broadly, should agencies be working with startups because that will facilitate new business? And just to reply to that, I think it's less about, there are a lot of agencies right now desperate to insert themselves between brands and startups. They see value at mediating that relationship. And there is some value in mediating that relationship, but only to the extent that you're helping identify a way to use the technology to develop a solution for that client that's meaningful to that client.
Can you talk about Chirpify?
Yeah, I can talk about Chirpify.
Okay. One of the things I'm interested in is, so there's this technology being born here and being nurtured, and I wonder sometimes if the agency world knows about some of these services. My thought here is that there's some symbiotic relationship between the agencies in Portland who understand what you're building and can riff on that in their business, and everybody benefits in that sense.
Yes. So I'll give you 2 minutes on what I think is really exciting about Chirpify. So they started with Twitter payments, so you could respond to a tweet, and open folks' eyes to, wow, this maybe social is a two-way channel that could be transactional. And then they took that to Instagram and Facebook and different channels. What's happened more recently, which is really exciting, is that yes, it's a two-way channel, but it's not just transactional. And I think if you look at what's happening with hashtags and social conversations as glue in a way that URLs used to be glue, that's where second screen is focused, people using their devices while they're watching TV. That's where live event stuff is focused. How do you participate and experience the soccer game at home or in the stadium? How do you link an advertising campaign to actions that people could take from anywhere when they can't click on billboards? So there's a lot of really interesting stuff happening around social as a response and interaction platform, and I think those guys are really well positioned to take advantage of that. So that's the kind of thing we're excited about.
So I don't know if the Timbers have an agency. The Timbers, for anybody who's watching this, are the Portland's soccer team. You would think that that would be a good partnership between the agency and Chirpify and the Timbers. Is that happening?
Timbers already using it. Timbers and
Yeah,
Thorns.
Timbers
That
and
was
the
done a while ago.
Thorns. Yep.
I mean, I just had an idea that
was a softball.
Good idea. Good idea. That credit all goes to Dylan.
No, I would say like that. If you look at Chirpify, the bigger value comes when you're talking about in second screen right now, and you look at the inbounds, the people that are very interested in what they're doing, or not your traditional businesses, not really your e-commerce businesses, but your brands and your broadcast partners, your media partners, your publishers that are looking to increase the amount of revenue they can drive, as well as the deals they can put together. So it's not just sponsored by Bing for the lounge, as an example, but there's some kind of way to actually generate revenue in a meaningful way through the television program that's going on. Target has, on Survivor, a promo that's going on there. There's a way to actually order that new product you just saw immediately through the second screen, through the phone you're holding in your hand. That's just, reply, shirt to Target, and its transaction's done. Sizing's already known. I mean, I think that's where the experiment is going with a lot of the big TV broadcasters right now, and you'll see this fall a lot of tests.
And do you have a favorite baby from the Nike Plus accelerator?
Favorite one, it's funny, you talked about startups or youthful companies. I think they're youthful people because I love them all. They're all my kids. But the one I really love is GeoPals, which is solving kind of this problem for kids age 5 to 12.
I just want to interrupt because people are going to look at this online. GeoPals?
GeoPals with a Z this time. So these guys are actually, Rich is in all of Techstars. We have 250 some companies we've funded in the past 6 years. He is our oldest founder ever. He is 43, which isn't old, but it is in startup land, right? And he just sold his last company prior to this. You guys know Crocs footwear, shoes, little holes in them? He made those things, if any of you have kids, that had like Disney characters that you put in the holes, called gibbets.
The things that cost more than the shoes.
Exactly.
Remember those?
Say 37 cents for a gibbets, yet I'll sell them at $8 at the mall. Brilliant, right? Found a product, found a need, and it was watching his kids string some yarn through their holes of their Crocs. He's like, we could do something there. And he just came up with the idea, called Disney, called a few other guys, made some prototypes and took it to market. Well, this company, GeoPals, is about basically building a physical activity peripheral, like think of it as a pedometer, a low-energy Bluetooth pedometer, that isn't just tracking how many steps your kids take, because trust me, I have on my kids, they take more steps than any of you will take a day. But it actually unlocks content for them, unlocks the iPad for them, unlocks the television for them, unlocks all sorts of other things instead of you as parents saying, get off your ass and get outside. Like, we have an obesity problem, we have a diabetes problem, we have all sorts of problems here, and they're doing social good. But at the same point in time, they'll be a $500 million company in no time at all. They left this program coming in, with an idea and a concept and a product prototype. They're shipping 1 million units into Target and Best Buy next month. And if you look at the price point of those and you kind of start doing the math, you'll see how fast that will scale. And I think best company, one of the best.
And that's an app that goes on a phone, or how does that work?
There's a parent app and a kid app. So the kids, there's a lock and key principle. The kids never know that the parents hold the key, where the parents can actually decide what activities earn what privileges, right?
So if you're an agency, and a lot of agencies have hospital accounts and healthcare accounts, this would be if you were out there looking at the landscape, somebody smart would say, gee, this might be something I can go to a huge hospital group with for adults.
I could tell you that, yes, schools, education, hospitals, fundraisers, charities, nonprofits, there's so many things to be done with that or with this or other devices that are ripe for looking at what exists in the world today and how do we tap into that and how do we bring a great strategic campaign, a story, an initiative that all of us want to drive revenue. It's not just not just a brand experience. We actually now most agencies are being held accountable on how much revenue did we drive. What was the uptick during that campaign?
Steve, I'm wondering, are there categories that if you were an agency you would consider? I mean, one that obviously comes to mind is mobile, but are there types of categories in the startup world that might make sense for agencies to get involved in?
Well, tough question, but I think that it goes back to my earlier point about what's the cost, what's the startup cost of getting going in the first place. Mobile, you could have one kick-ass mobile developer with a great idea, right, that works at your agency, and you could launch a mobile app. Mm-hmm. What does that take? Could take a month. Very, very easy. What we set out to do at Opal was, much more comprehensive enterprise software, very complicated code base. We built a platform to begin with, and we built our applications on top of our own platform via API. So it's all in the middle of that. And I think what it just comes down to is how much time do you want to allocate? How much resources do you want to allocate? Whether it's your own time as the agency owner or the employees that you're paying to work for you that could be working on something else making you real money.
So these are business decisions.
These are business decisions. So I think, probably the product guys would answer that question a little bit better. With me, I just think about margins and does this make sense to do it?
I feel like from agencies we see that are making a move or putting a toe in the water toward something that's more entrepreneurial or more startup oriented, a couple of different paths I've seen a lot take. One is if you're going to work with smaller companies, then you get into instead of design and creative and production, you get into experience design and developing the product, which is adjacent, depending on kind of what your focus as an agency is, and is closer to what they need. Because you're working with startups, you're building businesses and products, not campaigns as much. So I've seen that be successful, also unsuccessful for agencies. The other one is working with big clients. They've got a real, as someone talked about earlier, a real impetus around innovation right now. And how do we think like a startup, and how do we drive innovation and recognize innovation, and hence Opal. So helping them with that, finding a way, how do you become their partner in innovation, rather than letting that go to someone else or becoming an internal effort. I think that's another avenue that agencies are looking at, having some success with big companies.
We're seeing tours, South by Southwest, events, ad tech. We're seeing a lot of the agents taking their 1, 2, 3 top clients to these shows and actually setting up all the meetings ahead of time, and not really just, in Rennie's example, but why is this meaningful? They've done the research ahead of time. They know what they can do with it. They've done their background checks. They've made great decisions. But I think if you don't have someone in your agency that's paying attention, one person, like your job is this, but also your job is to look at everything else that could possibly be happening out there. Like spend 10% of your time reading every tech blog, of talking to every people in this circle, see what's happening next, and that might propel you forward on the next campaign idea.
When the brands that you worked with, the Nikes and the Beats by Dre's, came to you, they didn't come to you and say, we want to buy software to do X. They came to you with, we have a problem, we have an idea, we have a need, maybe you can help us get there. So it was about the forward-leaning, innovative brands that either starts or ends with.
I think that your point of view has to be not from an article you read, but reading the tea leaves better than anyone, right? So I can go to a Beats by Dre and have a point of view on how to roll out digital when they have nothing, right? They were 70 people when they started talking to me. Now they're like 300, and that was a year ago. So having that point of view and being able to come in and say, I can read the tea leaves better than anyone, even if you have that conversation with Google, I kind of can see where everything's going, and that's where you provide value. So I think it's like, for me, I got hired a lot to think through systems and how to build teams and how to help people work better together and what are the sort of milestones we have as a brand, right? That's what I did at my agency, in addition to having a team that could build products. So I think there's something interesting.
I just want to stop for a second to tell people that in a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, I'm going to ask for questions so we get some dialogue going here. So if you can start thinking about anything that you need to know. I'm wondering what your next move is with your business. Are you just sort of waiting to? Well, let me phrase it differently. How do you get your next batch of companies that you work with? How do you find them?
So our business has a different cycle than the accelerators, which I really envy. I wish we could have a class every 6 months and that we had like week 11, this is what we're going to focus on.
It sounds good, but I realize it's not possible.
Fair enough. So what we end up doing is we structure around quarters. And so for this year, we have an investment fund and we have investment partners. And we have a target of deploying what's probably between 400 and 500K into 2 to 3 companies a quarter. And that's about as precise as we can get, because we don't want to, and the investor part of our business would be disadvantaged if we say, well, it's got to be 100K a quarter, so we got to go find one, good or not. And so that's the goal. So we know about how much capital we're going to deploy, and we know about what kind of team we're going to do. And so much of this equation is not just, hey, we like this startup, but do we like the startup, and can we actually help them? To Rennie's point, like can we add value to them, and do they match an investment thesis that we and our investment partners share? So those things line up 2 or 3 times a quarter, and then we frankly kind of fill up. We've gotten very, very busy for the remainder of the summer. We'll be looking at some things in the fall that we can start in the strategy and design phase, and then do some more building into the winter. But 2 companies. Maybe 3 is about as many as we can go deep with.
And are these Portland companies? Is that
Yeah, almost all Portland. When I'm talking to an investor in Silicon Valley, I say, oh, well, yeah, focused on Portland. But
This isn't being recorded.
Hawaii, and oh yeah, exactly. So yeah, we've got one in Hawaii, which is very exotic sounding, and in Seattle. But we're really focused on Portland. We spent a lot of time and energy understanding the Portland ecosystem, and more often than not, it's finding great companies that are coming out of accelerators, helping them tee them up to OAF and to TIE and to Madrona and Trinity and Voyager and the VCs who have an interest in the ecosystem here. And I will say there's a lot of money outside of Portland that is very interested in participating in the Portland ecosystem.
So what is happening in Portland? Are people, do we just have people that actually live here that are doing this, or are they moving here from Brooklyn, New York?
It's a combination of everything. I mean, we've got, second level entrepreneurs now. Their second time, they're doing their next thing. We have people that have disappeared away, and actually, a lot of people return here by the time they have kids. They're like, San Francisco, it's over, heading back to Portland. New York's over, heading back to Portland. So we're benefiting from a lot of that. People have got experience, they're coming back. They want their family here. They can raise their kids here. We're becoming that type of destination. We're also hitting this tipping point on luring young people that actually want to work. Unlike the Portlandia mentality they put all over the United States, there's actually a lot of people here that hustle. And I think that more and more people that we're attracting here are amazed when they get here to meet all the other people that in agencies and in professional services and in other startups that are killing it. They're up to 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, and they have this shared mentality. So that's growing here now with some successes, with Jives, with Urbans, with Puppets, with a lot of these that are kind of hitting that stride. JAMA, and I think that's helping us. We have an unfair advantage. We talk about deal flow. We'll see for every class that we put up that we're going to recruit in any city, anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 applications from all over the world come in. And that gives us a bunch of visibility. Our goal for Portland and other cities is not just recruit people to come to Portland, it's to keep them in Portland. We want to keep building an ecosystem. And we know that Portland really is a city of transplants. And the more of these we get in here, the bigger our community is going to grow from that.
Is there money in Portland, or is the money outside of Portland?
There's money here.
Can you turn the camera off?
There's a lot of money in Portland. The money in Portland isn't as experienced in startup investment as it is in Seattle and San Francisco and Chicago and New York. In Boulder, I mean, we've Brad Feld is one of the great VCs, and he's one of the founders of Techstars, and so we can attract a lot of people to Portland. We can get a lot of people to invest here because of that. If you look at True and you look at Foundry and you look at Trinity and Madrona, a bunch of others that are coming here more and more and spending more money here. Success begets success.
I think it's simply that, like, if you go into a casino to gamble and you're like, I don't have very much money in my bank account, but I'm going to spend $100, right? You're kind of very tepid and you're not really sure what you're going to invest in, and you kind of place it here and there, and you're very, very, very careful. In the Valley, like they don't really care about the money. It's like a rich person going in and just spending whatever. They don't even pay attention how much they lose, because it's not so much about the money as much as it is how big can this company scale to, right? It's the big bets.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
All
the
of
risk
investing-
return profile,
Exactly.
right? And I think that's the difference in Portland when I think about money. You know, and it depends if you're talking angel investment or are you talking about institutional, the first round, the Series A stuff. And it's generally speaking, right? There's some VC presence here, certainly not a lot. There are certainly angels that have been here for a long time, people with a lot of money. The risk profile isn't quite as far along. People aren't thinking about,
5 to
again,
7 years.
yeah, 5 to 7 years building and supporting billion-dollar companies and things like
I
that.
think a 5 to 7 exit.
Yeah,
So
and that's
that-
not necessarily a bad thing. I'm just saying I don't think
just not there yet.
we're not where I think that we know we
Well,
want to be.
and I'll say I don't know whether we get there or not. I think is there better? It's very different. It's when I started getting involved in investing here and investing community. I don't know. I probably would have said there's 20x the money in Portland in San Francisco that there is in Portland, and I think now the number is like 500x. I mean, it is such a different game. To your point, but I also think that the stakes, especially on the Series A, and if you guys follow this at all, people talk about the Series A gap, which is the VCs who want to put in real money. They've moved the goalposts out. So you used to put in $1.5 million to somebody with a little traction, and now, because there's so much early stage activity, they want to put $3-4 million into someone with real customers and real revenue, and maybe even a path to break even.
That's
So
right.
that's much further, and that's part of why Upstart plays in this space in between, because the space has gotten so big. But the goalposts now, I was down at a conference 3 months ago, and the guy on stage from Sequoia said, I believe it was Sequoia, said, it used to mean something to have 10 million users for your app. But these days, just because you have 10 million users, you're not necessarily onto something.
You don't necessarily have a business.
Right? Yeah, it's just, right, which is true. I mean, at that level, when you're trying to be the next Instagram, that's how, and that's definitely not the mentality, I think, of the game that we're playing here. And there's pros and cons.
But it's very difficult. I mean, looking at this world from the outside, and you see where the money's going, and there are so many, and I'll be polite here, silly companies getting funded. So if you were in Portland and you were actually a startup, where do you fit between being brilliant and silly? I mean, what works here? If you were starting,
You ever heard about that bacon company?
bacon? Oh,
I say, Portland does really well in business-to-business SaaS companies. Does incredibly well. That's the bread and butter. So many hidden companies that you might not read about in the Oregonian or Silicon Forest or anywhere else that are killing it. Vesta's been here forever. Those guys do phenomenal business. There's so many.
SurveyMonkey, right?
SurveyMonkey, right down the
Who
street.
knew?
Yeah,
Right,
right.
yeah.
I mean, there's some great successful companies here, and they stay quiet. And that's part of Portland's charm and also part of its dilemma.
So-
We don't brag as much as the Valley, and we don't as a city, and that's a little bit of a detriment, but it's also who we are.
I'm going to ask a question in a second, but I'm just wondering, what should people be reading? Sort of the obvious is TechCrunch. What else should people be
I
reading?
think maybe stop reading as much and start talking more, honestly, because if you
Was that a diss?
look, I look at them all. End of the day, I read up what the hell happened, and most of the time, nothing against anyone's in PR because I love PR. It's my number one thing. But PR positions a lot of articles and a lot of launches, and there's a local company here today I had lunch with, and I said, "Well, it was amazing news yesterday." So what does that mean? They're like, "I don't know, but it made a really cool infographic." So, and it's just noise and it's visibility because you have to be louder in the Valley if you're raising your next round. I would say spend more time talking. I mean, I learn more. I think we all learn more in meeting and sitting down one-on-one with people, exploring new ideas. If we find something that's new, hunt those people down and figure out how to get their time.
I mean,
All right, well, let's,
true mentor relationships, right? I mean, that's what you guys really do well is find somebody that has actually truly been there and done that. Talk to them. Yeah. Get on a plan that's 2, 3, 4, 5 years behind where they are going, where they've been, and learn from that. I think you'll get a lot more value out of that than from any blog.
Well, this is a good segue, right? So these guys are saying don't read, talk.
I have actually an explicit answer for you if you want one. The guys who founded Twitter started a blogging platform called Medium.
Yeah.
It's amazing. So much good content on there, medium.com. The other one is Subtle, which is another good one.
Yeah, subtle, Quib, and Medium.
They're all long form content, but
Yeah.
it's I think that what's happened is that we're all obsessed with like the Twitter feed. Like I can't even go to the Twitter feed. I go there like once a week now, maybe even less, because it's just so much noise and kind of like it's always the same people. And I'm like, I need new thinking. So I go to those sites that have long form content where people really dive into something and provide interesting insight. I think that if you're getting everything from your feed and rarely dipping out of it, that it's
So we
almost
should
too
short
much.
our Twitter stock?
No.
I don't know.
Someone I talked to recently who I thought had a really good perspective on doing it well is Kevin Hurst, who runs the eBay group here. There's like 175 eBay engineers, like a block and a half that way, and they're growing, right? Yeah, and I didn't know that. But what he's done, what I think they've been focused on is how do we do this in a way that's right for Portland, in a way that it creates the culture here, and we're going to be downtown. And they hosted an event, an open house, earlier this week, and I think that's what needs to happen from the business side. I think I feel like it kind of, if you just look at the tax breaks and then decide let's go to Hillsborough, it's going to be tough.
Yeah,
I'm being
it.
glib, but I think there's an important part
being
there.
in Portland is a lifestyle choice. We all want to be here for a certain reason. We want to work down. I don't want to work in Hillsborough ever.
Ditto.
Yeah, I want to be surrounded by a creative class of people. I want to be surrounded by a little bit of reality. Portland's not true reality, but a little bit of Portland reality. But obviously the PDC, the city of Portland, a lot of the orgs are. We had a meeting last night, kind of a few of us, to talk about kind of the situation in Portland, where it's going and what they're doing. I think with TAO, with a bunch of the other associations, they are helping. If you're thinking about tax breaks as the first thing as a company, you're not thinking about a startup, not thinking about small, medium-sized businesses. You're thinking about a corporation that's putting a regional office here. There's just not a headquarters town. I don't know unfortunately, if it will ever be a headquarters town. I hope someday it is to a few companies. But that's really not the mentality of what Portland's thinking.
Interestingly, I think where we've seen this play out is, and I think we'll get to watch it over the next year with Urban and Jama and Jan Rain, folks who have grown in Portland, and now they have to move to a bigger office, and they get, can they make the economics work to stay? And will the market let them, or do they have to make a move? And so, Urban stayed here in town, which is great. And so I think that's where the rubber often meets the road, is a company hits 150 people, and then can it stay in Portland or does it move out?
And it's interesting because all these things are tied together because funding comes into play here, right? So a lot of those companies you just named, they received funding from the Valley, but the Valley VCs are comfortable with them staying and growing their businesses in Portland because they're starting to realize the way to get businesses off the ground and continue to accelerate them in a city like Portland is a lot easier than San Francisco. Right. San Francisco, you have to pay for rents or average cost per employee or all those variable costs associated with building a business are significantly more. So the VCs are starting to realize, hey, we can build great companies in Portland, but we have to give them money and we have to let them continue to thrive in Portland with all those economic factors and then also the culture you get as employees about building a business in Portland.
And why recruiting is difficult in Portland. A lot of people say that. It is, but it's not impossible.
No.
It's really kind of a mentality. I see companies in the Bay Area that their biggest problem is retention. Portland's biggest problem isn't retention. Right? Portland is finding new talent. People are loyal here. People love to put in their work and they're happy. Their employers treat them really, really well. In San Francisco, there's a new thing every other door you open up of someone looking for someone else with the next gold rush, and that's okay. And that fits the city. It's just not how it works.
Yeah,
here.
you would be surprised how many kids are in the Midwest developing stuff in their mom's basements that want to move to Portland. Like it's insane.
Yeah.
Like we get hit up like, I'm in Wisconsin, I'm in Minnesota. I'm like, I just want to get out of here. I love Portland. Sounds like an awesome city. And so recruiting is not the problem. I think the problem is that everybody is in perpetual stealth mode.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurial potential is just that you start something. No one finds you, right? It's like the incubator scene and the accelerator scene are new. Right? When I came to school, that didn't exist, and I was like, oh my God, I got to find a job. I had like this generic business degree. I talked to Dylan. I said I'd work for free because I knew how to build websites. So
he wouldn't go away actually.
Yeah,
So,
Yeah, just start it. Start something. Find someone else that is like-minded and just go. Just start.
But I would say it's just getting out of school, so there's a lot of opportunities. U of I don't know where you go to school. U of O has a program that's kind of a senior semester in the city program they do. They put people in place through the J School and a few other schools. I know that UP has some programs. Portland State has some programs. We're all looking for people. Like I use what we call associates and hack stars in our program. So we bring in associates on the business and marketing, research side of it that work with our 10 companies. We get hack stars, which are hackers, designers, UX, UE individuals that work on that side of it. And I think, 5 of the 10 ended up going to work for the companies as they walked out of the building. And that's, is a great way in. And, whether it be through, looking at how you could help out as an internship or a paid opportunity. There's a lot of these opportunities out there.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of networking and just getting out and talking to people.
I would add that, so when I got out of school, I didn't know what I could do. I had the ability to build websites. I was self-taught in that, and I went and I went and learned a business. And I think that learning a business can actually give you a lot more insight into starting. Like the 17-year-old kid that starts a startup without any world experience is really, really rare. But I mean, I went in and worked for Dylan, and I learned a ton about a lot of different stuff. So we were at an agency. I learned how to sell. I learned how to do account management. I learned how to build more stuff. So I think getting a job somewhere in a field where you have interest is a great way to do it.
I've seen some companies that say, look, we're going to give you $50,000 worth of work. And they identify that and put some bumpers around it. And in turn, based upon the note, we'll consider that as part of an investment note. And when that note converts at a round, so once that it gets critical mass, you have $1 million, whatever it might be, we convert that into equity then. So it's like no skin out of, and there's nothing in anyone's pocket at that point in time except for time, hours, work, and effort.
It could be I'm just talking to the wrong company.
Well, maybe, but
it also really, really depends on where.
You guys do a little bit of this
we
too.
We do a bit of that, and it just really depends on where the company is in the cycle and what their fundraising experience is. I think there are companies that are perpetually fundraising, and they're always trying to figure out how to work that equity cash balance, and they would love to explore that, right? Because it'd be bad not to. How would you not? Then there's others like, we raised the money. I don't ever want to think about fundraising again. Now we're just going to execute, and we hope we never have to raise again because that's the worst thing that ever happened to me. Yeah, and so it really depends on what the vibe is. I think it does complicate the relationship, right? Because it's not just you pay me this and I'll give you this. Now it's I'm an owner, and what does it mean, and what's the thing? And so what we try to do is when we do those sorts of things, we try to structure it in a really simple way, in a way that basically treats it like cash. Yeah. This is cash that you simply paid us with a different color check.
I would say that's the right way to do it. It's never take an owner mentality of an equity stakeholder. That's something down the road.
And get a tax attorney as well, maybe, that can help you out in here, because the way that those investments are structured work better from both sides of the equation if there's not big tax impacts until ultimately value is created. So if you get certain types of equity consideration, it's essentially taxable to you as income, basically. But if different types of equity, NSO stock options, for example, aren't taxed. So if you could probably go to a startup with a really simple way for them to compensate you for their efforts, along with Dylan's idea of quantifying the value of that, those two things together probably would work a lot better.
I think
I've
quantifying the value period is important. It's at 50,000, it's at 20,000. Like, put some parameters around it. If not, you're going to be abused more than the company would be abused, and it's not complete. It's a relationship of understanding going into it.
What does that mean? To actually say we're going to put in X number of hours?
No.
How do you do that?
I hate hours. I think it's money. We're going to do $50,000 worth of work. I hate the notion of hours, and
We're going to complete this.
Yeah, we're gonna do these things.
If I'm a startup, so it's a set of deliverables.
No. If not, that CEO is going to measure you against hours, and everything's going to be against hours. Hours are foolish. It's a way you would maybe bill internally, but it's not a way that you ever represent value to a customer.
We, the media, has done work for companies that already have the sizzle. It might be like a marketing exec that left Nike or something like that, that says, hey, I want to build this. I got an idea. We build products for that idea, right? And they have all the sizzle side. And then we've done, I think a lot of agencies do the opposite, where they, there's a couple tech guys that can't tell their story, and they need someone to come in and just be like, this is how you tell it. This is how you get excited about it, whatever.
We ended up doing, because we struggled with that a bit, but from a utilization perspective, and we ended up splitting it into, there's a design and development around products and companies, and then there's a go-to-market offering that's about taking that product to market. And one of the reasons we did that, we're very fortunate. We have a really talented and very versatile designer who I think is here. I'll embarrass him. Derek's in the back. But he's a really valuable resource for us. And when we were doing a little bit of design whenever, it was very hard to not overwhelm him. So by putting things in those buckets and saying, here's how it fits into product design versus go-to-market, it helped a lot.
Will you be sharing his resume with?
No poaching. You leave that man alone.
All right.
What's his name again?
Bob.
If you want to see, sort of this idea of resumes, go to what's it called? Mobile Mondays. What's it? Mobile something. There's
Mobile Portland?
Mobile Portland has a meeting every couple of months, and which I recommend highly. It's worth getting in the room with the mobile guys. And what you realize when you sit in the room is the activity in terms of trying to fill jobs, the lack of mobile engineers in this market, I would suspect, around the country.
It's really funny though. We're billing Portland as like a mobile epicenter of mobile development and mobile apps and mobile this, and everything's mobile now. It's not really any different. But I mean, we can't find no one can find these people. They're the white whales right now. They don't all exist. So I think it's better for us. If I had one thing I would do for the city of Portland, I'm not running for mayor, but just a quick stump, I would invest more in education and training and engineering and design schools here in the city, because I think that's our strength. And I think as a community, that's where we excel. And I think as a services industry, that's where we're delivering the most value in any business we have in the United States. Engineering and design. I mean, those two things, that's the future. And we're at the point we could actually own this.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Okay.